Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest for this series is Michelle Porter. Michelle is an author, poet, and a postdoc fellow at the University of Toronto, where she's pursuing a unique blending of her research and creative output. Her book, due out this month from Wilfrid Laurier University Press, is called Scratching River. It's a memoir that's part poetry and part nonfiction, but it's all based on family, one's relationships with the landscape and a sense of place, and on her Métis ancestry, a First Nations group of mixed European and Indigenous roots. In the next 4 episodes of this series, which is provided with support from Wilfrid Laurier University Press, Michelle and I discuss her research background, her writing style, which she describes as creative nonfiction, and the major thematic elements in Scratching River. In this first episode, we hear from Michelle about her research and her Métis background. Okay, Michelle, welcome to the program. Let's start with a little about you. Can you tell us about your writing and research?
Yes, definitely. Well, my writing and research is really all related to where I come from, who I am. I like to say that I'm the descendant of a long line of Métis storytellers, and that's I'm bringing that tradition forward. But my ancestors told their stories using music, and I use the written word. For whatever reason, the music didn't quite get passed down to me, but there's music in the words that I write, and that's how I think of it. Right now, I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Toronto, and I'm a fellow with the Rupert's Land Centre for Métis Research. And within that realm, I'm focusing on what's called arts-based research. So in that, I bring together academic research and the creative engagement that for me is writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm bringing that all right to the center, centered around bison. So arts-based research really it's a beautiful liminal space between arts and research. But in traditional Métis world, it's really a fancy name for how knowledge has always been understood, processed, and passed along. And that's why I believe in the power of arts-based research in shaping how we understand the past, how we understand our present, and our possibilities for the future. And within that work, I have a number of books that I have put out and am putting out that are all different kinds of arts-based engagement with the Métis bison-focused research that I've been focusing on. You know, today we're talking about Scratching River, a creative nonfiction book. I have Approaching Fire, which focuses on my great-grandfather. I have a book of poetry inquiries that looks at a whole bunch of Métis history stories that my mother passed down to me. And I have my first book of fiction coming out in 2023, and that stays both within that beautiful realm of building on the research and the broader understandings that I've learned from engaging with ecosystem-based research, land-based research, bison-centered research, and the Métis history and the possibilities for the Métis future. But I'm doing that in fiction, which is such a challenge and such a beautiful thing as well.
Right. Yeah, we'll certainly dig into that a bit more. Can you talk a little bit about how, in terms of the timeline of this? So you're now doing your research, but you've been writing for a long time, right? I mean, how
Yes.
can you put the context of your writing into your current research?
For sure. I've always been a writer and, had a little thing published here or there. But it wasn't until I got to my PhD where I focused on people's relationships with the land that I really hit that sweet spot between how the research and how that academic knowledge just created this burst of inspiration, really. So the first book of poetry that I put out, that was 2019. I was just finishing my PhD at that point. And that really focused on themes of home, the very close home being lived in mobility, stories that my mother told me.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I was really focusing on oral history and um, some of that contemporary way of moving.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as I moved into, I did a beautiful arts based postdoc with the University of Guelph before my current position, and there I encountered. That's where I really dug into arts based research, and was allowed to. Arts based research isn't welcome in all academic units because it can be seen as not standardized or standardizable. What it does bring is that beautiful meaning. So during my first postdoc with the University of Guelph, I dug deep into doing research about my great grandfather, and wrote that book, Approaching Fire, that set that down in terms of focusing on his life story, the music that he told, the music that he played, because he was,
Mm-hmm.
a center of a traditional Métis band, the Red River Echoes. And it was really during the writing of that book and the beginning of Scratching River that I really hit upon the ways in which I wanted to bring these stories together. So it was nonfiction that led me to that fictional story
Mm-hmm.
that I've been telling with, the book that will be coming out in 2023. Um, and it's been playing, it started off with a play with poetry, uh, because poetry is also a genre that looks at very closely at truth.
Mm-hmm.
And as I brought that poetic impulse to nonfiction, I also brought that engagement with historical research, with ecosystems research, and interview-based research, bringing all that together to create books that are braiding many voices to tell many stories as well.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned a few times now the Métis, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your family's ancestry there.
Certainly, yeah. The Métis people um, came together as a nation on the prairies
Mm-hmm.
here in what we call Canada now. Um, Came together as a nation in the late 1800s. I'm a descendant of the Goulet family, one of the old families that settled along the Red River and became a part of these original Métis families. So that goes back 1600s, actually. And this Goulet line goes right back to Jacques Goulet. Um, and he came over from France and married a First Nations woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Goulet family grew large, and there's many, many branches, and there are Métis Goulets, and all over the old Métis homeland. I'm also, related, as all Métis are, we're related to multiple family branches, to very strong connections to the Genthon family, which every Métis person would know. So the funny thing about being Métis is that when you meet another Métis person, the first thing you do is bring out your family tree and check who you're all related to, and how you've been related over the years. And rare is the time you don't find a new cousin or auntie or uncle. By comparing those, but it's also because the Métis people are a people that are that are based on a nation and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a blood quantum. So all the descendants of these early families continue to be in a variety of ways part of the Métis nation.
Excellent. That's wonderful. You earlier you mentioned briefly how things are centered on the bison. I'm wondering if you can explain for our listeners how central the bison were and are to the Métis people, and then also relatedly, how do bison studies act as sort of a foundational principle for your research?
I will, but I think I've realized the answer that you may have been looking for a bit earlier. So I'll just say that as well. I just realized, because I'd said this before, that in the arc of my writing,
Hmm.
I've always been interested in fiction, but it wasn't until I completed the postdoctoral research, my PhD research, and really engaged in a creative way with this broader body of ways of understanding and knowledge, that I was able to put down the stories and play with the different voices that appear in nonfiction, that I was able then to step into this fiction. I couldn't have written this novel that will be coming out without the foundations of the work I did at University of Guelph and at University of Toronto in arts-based research. It's been so beautiful and important to developing the way I think about the world and the stories. So to me, all of these genres are overlapping and related.
Okay,
And I think
excellent.
that's sort of what you were getting at.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, so bison.
Yes.
No, bison they were the Métis spiritual, cultural, and economic center. And the Métis were known by so many names. They're known as the flower beadwork people, the red river cart people, the people who know themselves, and the free people. So I really think that our ideas of freedom, the Métis idea of freedom, came from our close relationship with the bison.
Mm-hmm.
Bison are matriarchal. The females lead and are the center. The young calves are protected and nurtured. That the young are nurtured, and that's the matriarchal society. The women are the center, and the children are the center. Both a reflection of Métis, what Métis are. Bison nurture the land, and they nurture the people. Like bison, the bison are the creators of the prairies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all that we originally learned from the bison stays with us still. It's applied in modern ways, or stifled in modern ways. With my research, I want to see how we can rebuild new relationships with bison. So other indigenous groups are bringing back bison to the land. There's First Nations tribes, nations that are bringing bison back to their reservations and renewing their relationships. And I'm asking, what does that look like for the Métis, for a landless people? Because Métis, of course, lost their land.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the aspect that bison are keystone species. So they're necessary to the survival of the prairie ecosystem, and they were once necessary to the survival of the Métis people and all prairie indigenous people. The bison created life for us all. And the Métis are free, to bring it back to that, the free people, because we learned how to make our home in that travel, like the bison, mirroring the bison, as much as in multiple homes and seasonal places, by following the bison for the hunt. And this was transferred to a whole bunch of other ways of living when the bison declined over the centuries. So bison are a guide to my research. They remind me that all my research relates to the land and to our relationship with non-human people.
Mm. Excellent. Okay. So I wanted to go back briefly to how you mentioned that arts-based research is not always welcomed in certain institutions. Can you talk about that? Is that because it's sort of a bespoke approach to the discipline, depending on who it is that's doing the research and what kind of creative element that they're bringing into it?
I think it has a lot to do with. I mean, I'll come back. That this interpretation may be influenced by my sense of, the free people. A lot of it comes down to control, and I say that because it's easy to control what you can understand, and so if you can put knowledge in boxes and separate it from everything, and I don't mean they necessarily want to do specific things with anything, not that kind of control, but a sense of this is easily identifiable as one
Right.
thing.
Yep.
So the indigenous worldview, the Métis worldview, is that everything is related to everything else. And when you start walking down that road of knowledge, and there's paths for both kinds of knowledge. I'm not saying that all this wonderful medical knowledge that we have, that we get
Right.
from that particular approach, is wonderful. But alongside that, with that, or almost leading that, we need to have that idea that everything is that holistic research. Everything is related to everything else, and it's it's hard for a tried and true, specifically, a hard science academic to get their head around how not biological knowledge is built into story, how
Mm.
biological knowledge is built into, the beautiful kinds of beadwork. And flower paintings that some amazing Métis artists are putting out there right now. But it's really also just a recognition of the diversity of humanity.
Mm.
Some people learn in that traditional academic manner, and some people learn in this, traditional arts-based manner. Some people, you build it into a whole bunch of different genres, I could say,
Yeah.
and it just builds in its power and its meaning.
Right.
And it's just always been the way that we've done it, and Indigenous peoples have built a huge knowledge system and transmitted it using these arts-based practices for, millennia. So it's a really, really powerful tool.
Mhm.
It just doesn't easily fit into boxes. And the other thing academia wants to evaluate, it's hard to evaluate something that doesn't fit into boxes and that you can't, check off or you can't check off the boxes, or you can't say, wait, there's 50 things braided into here, and a different reader will come away from it with different knowledges or different parts of it, depending on where they're at in their lives. So,
Right. Yeah, you can't say you braided 50 things, but you missed these other 5. You
yeah,
can't just
exactly.
say it's not a quantifiable thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not
Yeah.
quantifiable, and academia really is about quantifiable knowledge and evaluation.
Mm.
I think that's a big challenge, even as I'm looking at teaching at, when we're looking at going into teach arts-based research, that is a big question from many people. How then do you evaluate? And there's all kinds of approaches to this.
Right. Right. Excellent. You just heard from Michelle Porter, an author, poet, and postdoc fellow at the University of Toronto. Michelle's first book of poetry, Inquiries, was shortlisted for the Pat Lowther Memorial Award in 2019 and was a finalist for the E.J. Pratt Poetry Award in 2021. Her memoir, Scratching River, is due out this month from Wilfrid Laurier University Press. This series is brought to you with support from Wilfrid Laurier University Press. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.